So what I thought I would do real quick was give a very brief overview of the few projects that the FBI confiscated and that they were the most upset about, and that was put into the transcripts both for indictment and then later they hoped to have put them in if I had to go to trial, which I didn't. So this was the first one. This was a project we were working on, Marching Plague. And what we basically were wanting to do there was to call attention to the illegal use of germs, again, by the United States. The United States was in clear violation of the Biological Weapons Act of 1972. And we just wanted to remind everybody why germ weapons were made illegal to begin with. And the way we decided to do it was to reenact one of the very famous germ tests. It was a tactical weapons test at the Isle of Lewis. And it was done at the very end of the British germ warfare program. And they were pretty desperate by this point. They didn't know what they could really use it for. They just knew the Japanese were doing it, so they better be doing it too. And after their tests had failed to be any kind of competent weapon, they finally thought what they could do was make it a ship-to-ship tactical weapon. And they went out into the seas of the Isle of Lewis to test this out. They set up a pontoon boat full of guinea pigs. And basically, they shot simulant at it first to see if they could get the germs to travel right. And when they thought they could, they shot actual anthrax and plague to see how it would work. And it didn't work very well. It worked really poorly. And that was kind of the end. The British did a few more experiments. But basically, they pulled the plug and said this is a very useless weapon. The United States came to the same conclusion, only much later in the late 60s, which is why there was a biological weapons treaty at all. And so you can see on ours, we set up our pontoon boat full of guinea pigs. And much like we did, we used the same simulant and tried to see if we could hit these guinea pigs with this particular variety of bacteria, only if we were using a safe kind. We never used the actual diseases. And we completely failed at it too. It didn't work for us, 50 years later, 60 years later, the weapons are still like total failures, and it's just an incredible waste of public money. And we were writing a book on this same topic, and so as you might guess, the FBI finding out that that's what we were working on was none too keen. They couldn't really stop the project. We still went along with that. They confiscated what they could. They took away all our bacteria, and they took away our microbiology lab. And they confiscated the manuscript we were working on. They took every copy of it. They found every one, so there was no backup. We had to start all over again to write that particular book. So that was the A part. Okay, if you go to the next one under that, after Marching Plague.
Free-range grain.
Free-range grain, correct. All right, free-range grain, they weren't happy about this either. Even though it was really a benign project, all we were really trying to talk about was what will happen when a few multinational corporations have control of the world's food supply, which they're well on the way to. And in order to make that more interesting to people, because that's a rather abstract political conversation that most people are not interested in having, we made the gesture of testing people's food to see if it was, in Europe, to see if it had genetically modified product in it or not. Theoretically, if it's not labeled in Europe as having GMO, it shouldn't have any. And so we were doing these tests, and if the results were, and these are impressionistic, so take it with a grain of salt. The results that we got in Holland, all the food was clean. In Germany, it was about 50-50. And then Austria, which we went to because they're the most militant about no GMOs, everything we tested was contaminated. So it was an interesting tour through Europe.
It's worrying.
What's that?
It's very worrying.
Yeah. Well, just remember, there's no linkage yet between health problems and GMOs. Most of the problems with genetically modified organisms are either ecological or political. And, and that's what we really wanted to get through to people, in spite of the fact that what most folks are worried about is their health if they eat them. But, take America, it's a giant testing ground right now. For the past 20 years, almost every American eats GMOs every day. And so far, there hasn't been a health implosion. So, like I said, I fear much more thinking about Monsanto and control of the world's food supply than in eating a bowl of cornflakes that might have some GMO in it. Anyway, what the FBI really didn't like about this project wasn't as much the politics as it was people having their own labs. That just seemed a bit too empowering to them. It seemed like we were showing a little bit too much agency. And the belief that really only professionals should do this kind of thing, that amateur science was something that could only lead to trouble, and for the most part, amateur research probably should be equated with terrorism. So we had problems with this project. They, of course, confiscated everything from free-range grains. We lost all our lab, everything. They took all of our enzymes, too. That was the part that really hurt, because the wetware for these projects are the most expensive thing. Reagents have to be one of the most expensive things on Earth for what you get. Right? I mean, just, a microliter can cost hundreds of dollars. So they had put that in and said, who knows why we were using this microbiology lab and this molecular biology lab. We were probably up to no good. And the reason they thought that was the third project, if you go down to molecular revolution, or contestational biology. Hopefully it's bright enough that you guys can see it there. Oh, that's good. And in this particular project, we did this as a provocation against Monsanto. We took some of their seeds and basically looked for a way that if you were to spray the herbicide that pairs with that particular seed, Roundup Ready, so there's Roundup Ready seeds and Roundup Ready herbicide, if you use that, it would kill the plant, that the plant would not be immune. And the way we went about doing it was from changing the key trait, that is the imported gene, which is a bacterial gene, and instead of letting it be a trait of adaptability, we attacked it as a trait of susceptibility. And by doing that, any herbicide that you make will not hurt any other plant, because no other plant has bacteria genes in them. So you could target Monsanto's plants specifically and not hurt any other plants or endanger anything else in the general environment, including humans. And so we did find a chemical that worked pretty well, pyridoxal 5-phosphate, which is a vitamin B enzyme, so it's actually healthy for humans, but bad for the plant. And between sunlight and the spray and the pyridoxal, it will definitely kill a Roundup Ready plant. And we were going to make that into defense kits for organic farmers who were having their crops impinged upon by the flying pollen of the GMOs. Needless to say, the FBI and Monsanto both were not crazy about this, and we did it at a pretty well-known American institution, at Corcoran, and we advertised it. So we were in all the newspapers, and sure enough, Monsanto sent its lawyers right away with a cease and desist order, and happily we did not comply, and the museum supported us, which was kind of shocking. We weren't really expecting that. So it was non-compliance, but anyway, that got us on a very bad radar. And, we've gone through it in reverse order, but now you can just send it forward and see how the cascade effect went in terms of the projects and why they were looking at us. Now, that said, by way of introduction to the film, there was a lot of other things going on that partially just made me the wrong person at the wrong time. I just wasn't in the right place. And in some ways, the fact that I got wrapped up in that FBI dragnet was partially due to just an arbitrary coincidence of my wife and CAE member, Hope, dying and being turned in by an emergency worker who called the FBI and said, hey, there's someone that has laboratory equipment. And at the time that happened, it was the Bush administration, and the Bush administration was rewarding law enforcement by bringing in terrorism cases. That was the number one thing, because they wanted to prove domestic terrorism so they could continue with their various nefarious plans of injustice and, quote, preemptive justice. And that's why the United States had a very strong run for many, many years in the Bush administration, up to about 2006, 2007, of all these fake cases. I mean, just cases that clearly the people were not terrorists, but they were going to try and triumph for it, because if you were successful, it was the best way as a law enforcement agent or as a prosecutor to get a major promotion. That's what was really being rewarded. And this was particularly true in Buffalo, where the only successful case of domestic terrorism up to that time, the Lackawanna 6, had been prosecuted. So, the Department of Justice and the FBI were really keen to arrest somebody as soon as they could, and I unfortunately was the test case for that. Unfortunately for them, they had no idea what kind of resources I could muster worldwide to mount a defense against what was clearly an unjust accusation. So with that, I think we're running a little on time. We want to get you to the film as soon as possible, since that is the reason that we're all here tonight.
Okay.
I hope you enjoy it, and at the end, I will come back and answer any questions you might have, or if there's anything you want clarification about, I'm happy to do it. Well, shockingly enough, it didn't change all that much, because when the case happened, we were, and I think the film talks about this, or we talk about it in the film. Are we breaking up?
No, it's fine.
Okay, good. The film talks about this, that we really were not going to back down. We really felt it was, a matter of social justice, that we continued to do our work the same as we always had, that we didn't change our projects, that we completed the ones that we were working on. And, we stood by that for 4 years. And then when we got through all of the problem and came out the other end and won our case, well, after that, we weren't ever going to really change. We kind of thought that, hey, we've taken the worst of it now, and we're still the same. And so, we weren't going to shift very much. The follow-up question that usually comes with that is, do you do work about the case? And we've done a little bit, especially when we thought I was going to go to trial. But for the most part, no. I mean, that's something that happened to us personally, and we see it as very different from our practice.
Yeah. And another questions? Melina, you come here. You come over here. So.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
I don't know if we're becoming more radical, but we're certainly holding the line. It's easier right now than it was, because, the Bush administration being over, and during the Bush time, everything was answered with negativity and violence, right? So whether, it was torture or wars or, just one atrocity after another. The Obama is much more to the friendly side of authoritarianism. And so we kind of have to meet that with that same kind of friendliness. It's to go up against that a kind of authoritarianism that stays latent and hidden, and that we just have this massive national security agency surveillance state. But one that is not trying to put everybody in jail, just trying to watch everybody. it's a different kind of strategy and kind of a more radicalized strategy like we would use against the Bush administration isn't really called for. This is, much more a strategy now of, and, I think WikiLeaks and Snowden kind of set the pace. Exposure is our best tactic. And, that's not the most radical gesture.
Right. Thank you.
Pleasure.
There's a question. Would you like to come over here? Oh. Okay. He's got to use a microphone.
It doesn't work.
Doesn't work. The microphone.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
He's coming over here.
Okay.
Well, surveillance like we have under the Obama state, we've always had that. We've been watched by various authorities for well over a decade now. So it's just more people now are waking up to the fact that it's happening to them as well, particularly in terms of big data. So no, it's not a problem for us. We basically do our work under the assumption that everything we do is being watched, and we proceed from there. We have good lawyers.
Correct. Okay. You have any other question?
Sorry? Any other questions?
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, pleasure.
Elaine?
So, it was a struggle for a little while, but luckily in terms of skill base, we're all replaceable.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Hope was a fantastic editor. We couldn't have asked for better, but we have a really good one again now, Lisa Summer, and she's doing an incredible job. She's a very good gateway for our work and our publications and to the public. She's stepped right into some very big shoes and is filling them quite nicely.
So it's okay.
I have a comment though before we
Please.
go, if I may make one.
Of course.
And I just wanted to say that a lot of the film that you saw is not the best in terms of its facticity. What Lynn was doing when she made that film was to try and really capture the tone, the emotional tone of the moment, of which she did an excellent job. She replicated it almost perfectly. But many of the things that happened in the film didn't actually happen. She's playing with the story, and she was also using a conglomeration of events that not only had happened to me, but it happened to her. And the part about the students not wanting to help, that was something that happened to her when she got in trouble at her university. In my case, my students were great. They totally rallied, and they did everything that they could. They did fundraisers, they did teach-ins, they went to protests, they organized events. I couldn't have asked for more support from my students. So they weren't hesitant at all. They jumped right in and got right into the fight. So, I always kind of say that at the end because I don't want my students to take a bad rap like they were scared to get politically involved. They were anything but that.
During that time.
Well, there's no doubt that it did. The net has been a godsend for organizing. Now, at the same time, it also has expanded the surveillance state beyond our wildest dreams. So, it's a double-edged sword. But yeah, the net made the distribution of everything we had to say, gave us this incredible, decentralized, unstoppable mouthpiece that couldn't be censored. So not only could we get everything we needed to say out globally and get it out quickly, it was unstoppable. And in the end, I think, we had a far better public relations team than the Department of Justice did. And globally, they just got pounded. They're still hurting from it to this day. The FBI is still having kind of meetings with bioamateur scientists apologizing and saying, please be nice, work with us, we're not the enemy, even though that's all a lie. But a lot of people tend to believe them. And the reason that they're doing it is from what they call Kurtzgate. They understand that their reputation was seriously hurt during this case. And like I said, to this day, they're making up for it. And the net was, to a great degree, the medium that allowed us to do that.
Yeah.